Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today I will be giving you the top 10 armies of June. So for those of you who are new to these videos, how I determine the top 10 armies is by looking at all of the GTs and major events that took place during June and were posted on the Best Coast Pairings app. And whichever armies made top 5 the most at these events get higher spots on the list. And because of the way competitive 40k is, where a lot of lists use multiple sub-factions to make their army, I determine the primary faction of an army by whatever sub-faction had the most points spent on it, and everything else in the list is just allies. Also, like usual, I will be showing all the lists for the armies that top these events, but some of these lists actually topped multiple events in June, so for those lists I'm only going to show them once instead of being redundant. And with all that exposition out of the way, let's now get into what you guys and gals came here for, and that is the top 10 armies of June. Number 10. Imperial Knights. That's right, this time around Imperial Knights are at the bottom of the top 10 this month. They seem to have dropped off harder than Pro Jared's career. With all jokes aside, they still made the top 10 this month, so they didn't really drop off that hard to be honest. They are still in a decent place and still a very strong army. They had 4 placings during the month of June, 3 third place finishes and a 4th place finish to get them the 10th spot on the list. So out of these 4 lists, 3 of them went with Crass Knights and 1 went with Volker. Personally, I like Crass the best because of the trait and the relic that they have. Their trait being that they can reroll failed hits in close combat when they charge, get charged, or heroically intervene, which I think this helps them be an all-rounder unit instead of just being delegated to only shooting. And the relic is called Headsman's Mark and gives +1 damage to their weapons when targeting a model with 10 plus wounds and 2 plus damage on their weapons when targeting a Titanic model. This relic works great on Crusaders and turns them into a pretty decent anti-tank machine. So again, they are like an all-around unit that can deal with a lot of different things, including other knights and stuff like tank commanders, which seem to be popping up in the meta. Knights are also usually played with allies like Admech or Astra Military in order to farm up some command points for the knights, but also because one of the biggest weaknesses of the knights is getting them inside of terrain. So they bring some infantry or stuff like wyverns to help deal with enemy units hiding inside of terrain. And also, the infantry can screen for the knights to make it harder for the enemy to charge them with some powerful melee units like smash captains, since the easiest way to kill a knight is through close combat where they don't get their invulnerable save. It does seem though that the popularity of knights is decreasing a bit, but I bet that will change with the new Chaos Knights Codex. Number 9. Adeptus Custodies. Gold members' favorite faction is back in the top 10 this month with 4 top 5 placings during the month of June. They had a 2nd place, 3rd place, 4th place, and 5th place finish. Since their beta rules were released for the Forge World Custodies stuff, Custodies have been seeing a decent amount of play at tournaments and have been doing extremely well. It would seem as though that the Caladius Grav tank is a staple now, and for good reason too. This is a durable vehicle that has the fly keyword, so it can leave combat if it gets charged, and it can still shoot. It has an ability that minuses 2 from an enemy's charge distance when they try to charge it. It hits on a 2+ and comes with more shots than that song by LMFAO. You park Trajan nearby 2 or 3 of these things for rerolls, and a Vexilla to make them -1 to hit, and they become incredibly efficient for their points cost. If you're a Custodian player though, and you're looking at trying to copy one of these lists, by all means go for it. But keep in mind that these Forge World tanks are really expensive to buy, and the rules for them are still in beta, so it's still up in the air if Games Workshop is going to nerf them before releasing their actual rules, so just be wary about that before making a big purchase on these units. Number 8. Space Marines.
What?
That's right, vanilla Space Marines have made their way back into the top 10. They had 5 top 5 placings during June. A 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th place finish. Between all 5 of these lists, we have Ultramarines, Crimson Fists, and Imperial Fists. So Crimson Fists is actually a sleeper army that I've been considering using for the past few weeks. And with the new Apocalypse box set, I finally took the plunge and figured I'd get started. Crimson Fists and the Indomitus Crusader formation go together like peanut butter and jam, or Eldar and cheese. The veteran intercessors get +1 attack for 3 attacks base, and then combined with the +1 that they get from Pedro, they have 4 attacks each with 5 on the sergeant. And with their chapter tactic, which is, as long as they are attacking a unit that doubles their size, they get +1 to hit. So against stuff like Tyranids or Jeanstealers or Orcs, they usually hit on 2s the entire game. You can also do this with Guilliman as well, although none of the Ultramarine lists use the Indomitus Crusader formation, and instead opt for more shooting. In one of the Ultramarine lists, we actually have 3 Predators, 3 units of Eliminators, and 2 Repulsors. So this list is actually extremely unique from what we've seen out of competitive Ultramarine lists in the past. And for the Imperial Fist, they use a Siegebreaker cohort formation with some Centurions inside of a Land Raider. And with this formation, the Centurions can dump out a ton of mortal wounds to vehicles, or they can just use their heavy bolters to annihilate regular infantry. So they become an all-rounder unit, which helps you kill what you need to. The combo in one of these lists is actually using a Phobos librarian alongside the Centurions with the Warlord trait Target Priority, which gives the Centurions +1 to hit alongside rerolling 1s to hit. This means that they are pretty much at 100% efficiency for their hits, which means more chances to roll those 6s for mortal wounds. Overall though, I'm glad we're seeing some vanilla Space Marines in the top 10 again. It's been quite a while since they've been on the list and not just an honorable mention. Number 7. Jeanstealer Cults. The faction that looks like that one guy from Star Trek is back on the top 10 this month with 6 top 5 placings during the month of June. The lists from this month are pretty much the same as the list from previous months. Lots of Brood Brothers, Acolytes, Aberrants, and then some random stuff throughout. But that's pretty much the core. This list can be incredibly hard to play against with all the shenanigans they can do, like deep striking within 3 inches, deploying units but then putting them into deep strike, the whole blip deployment thing. Jeanstealer Cult has a ton of tools to help a skilled player pretty much ensure victory. They are the perfect toolbox army. You have units of Acolytes with a ton of hand flamers that can come in and melt a screen, or even rock saws that can chew through all kinds of units if you buff them right, and then of course Aberrants that just hit like trucks. The one downside to the army though is that they aren't all that durable. So they are a glass cannon in a way. So I can see why some people might struggle with the army. It's a really good army, but it's also decently difficult to pilot correctly, which I feel is the balance of the army. Number 6. Jakari. The elves that Santa would be disappointed in are back in the top 10 this month with 6 top 5 placings during the month of June, with their placings being slightly better than the Jeanstealer Cult, so they beat them out with the tiebreaker. So judging by these lists and my own personal experiences as a Jakari player myself, it seems as though there are only 2 ways to run Jakari now, and that is either Grotesque or Talos Death Stars or Venom Spam. Blackheart is still the most used Cabal, but is mainly just for the staple of 3 Ravagers with Dizzy Cannons and a couple of Razor Rings. But Flayed Skull is actually becoming a lot more popular for the Venom Spam portion of the list. Flayed Skull is actually amazing from what I've found in my recent games, since I recently switched over to Flayed Skull for my Venom Spam. The Venoms get +3 inches to their movement for 19-inch movement, they reroll 1s to hit, and they ignore cover. And while Cabalites are inside the Venoms, they gain all those bonuses as well. It's actually kind of overloaded and works really well with those units. Dealing with units in cover can be incredibly hard with poison guns, since they don't have any AP and they only wound on force. But ignoring cover helps a lot with this, and rerolling 1s to hit makes them super efficient. To be honest, I don't know why I didn't use this Cabal sooner. For the Coven stuff, it's always Prophets of Flesh, since it's just worlds better than the other Covens because of the increase to the invulnerable saves. Also Irian as well. And all these Jakari lists are actually mono codex lists too. It seems as though Jakari doesn't really bring allies anymore ever since the change to Doom and Jinx. God, I miss those spells. Number 5. Tau Empire. The Bringers of the Greater Good come in number 5 this month with 8 top 5 finishes during the month of June. So kinda like Jakari, the Tau seem to have only 2 different list variants that seem to be topping events, and those are Triptide lists and Vehicle Spam. So the Triptide lists are exactly that, 3 Riptides, a ton of units to support them like shield drones or other types of drones, and marker lights. And then maybe some broadsides thrown in there as well, since they also synergize really well with the drones. With this type of list, it's a 1-2 punch. First, they use the Master of War ability to advance and shoot normally if they need to get a better position for maximum damage, and then turn 2, they use the Master of War ability again, with Shadow Sun, to reroll all their failed hits. And in some cases, you can actually just have 2 turns of rerolling all your shots if you have a good enough position on turn 1. This army is really hard to remove because of all the shenanigans they can do with the drones, and it hits harder than my dad when I told him I wanted to be a Twitch streamer for a living. The bulk of these armies too is always played as the Tau Sept, which overwatches on a 5+, so because Tau doesn't really get a close combat phase or a psychic phase, they kinda get a second shooting phase with their overwatch, because hitting on 5s, it's only slightly worse than the regular shooting, and with For the Greater Good, they can have their whole army overwatch you basically. And on top of that, the Tau army is actually extremely good at deleting 1 enemy unit a turn, so they can easily kill a squad of 30 boys, they can kill a knight, they can kill basically anything in 1 turn using marker lights, the Master of War ability, and the Tau Sept stratagem that gives their whole army +1 to wound against a specific target. Overall, this army is actually really good, and it's one of the armies I've been considering picking up recently. I'm not 100% sold on it yet, but there is still a good chance that I do pick up the army. Number 4. Astra Military, Imperial Guard. The regular humans come in at number 4 this month with 8 top 5 placings during the month of June. And for you Astra Military purists out there, you'll be glad to hear that only 3 of the 8 lists actually included allies, and 5 of these lists actually went for pure Astra Military. I've been saying this for a long time, but I do believe that Astra Military is a top tier army on their own without allies. It's just that the core of Astra Military actually helps out a lot of other armies as well when used as allies, so they are perfect for making an Imperium list with. But anyways, tank commanders have become really popular with their decrease in points in the last chapter approved, and with the new formation they got in Vigilus Defiant. They are toughness 8, decently cheap, can give themselves orders, and with grinding advance can put out a decent amount of DACA. The one downside to them though is that if they get tied up in combat by an enemy unit, they are essentially useless. But Guard can bring 1,000,000 bodies to screen for them, so that kind of mitigates that weakness. Wyverns and Basilisks are still a staple in Guard as well, since they help deal with units hiding from line of sight or in magic boxes, and with the artillery formation, they have some utility with them as well. You can use the double shoot stratagem combined with the reroll everything stratagem for maximum efficiency, and the other stratagem that slows down an enemy infantry unit can come in clutch against armies like Thousand Sun Soup by essentially slowing down their whole army and giving you more turns of shooting against it. As for some unique units we haven't really seen in top lists before, we have some Manticores and some Vulture gunships. Personally, I don't really like the Manticores, but I could see myself getting on board with the Vulture gunships. Those things put out an insane amount of DACA, and they're decently cheap too. Now before we get into the top 3 armies of June, let's go over some honorable mentions. These armies had top 5 placings during the month of June, but either because of tiebreakers or not enough placings, they didn't get a spot on the list. So this month we have Blood Angels with 2 placings, Thousand Suns with 4 placings, Death Watch with 2 placings, Admech with 1 placing, Death Guard with 2 placings, Space Wolves with 3 placings, and that's right, I did say Space Wolves, Necrons with 3 placings, Chaos Space Marines with 3 placings, Tyranids with 1 placing, and Harlequins with 1 placing. So just because I have a feeling I'll get some comments down below asking for them, here are the Blood Angels and Space Wolves lists. And while you guys are checking out these lists, I just wanted to take a moment to say that I believe that 8th edition is actually it's getting amazing, and GW is doing a great job at balancing the game. Look at how many different armies we are seeing in these top lists. It's not just like the same list over and over and over again that's winning every event. Sure, there are some lists that are kind of like being used here or there or popping up more often, but I mean, look at everything that can possibly win an event right now. This is the first time in the game that at least I'm aware of that we've had this much diversity in top ranked lists. So I'm extremely happy with what Games Workshop is doing with the game, and I'm extremely happy with the state of the game right now. And now with the honorable mentions out of the way, before we get into the top 3 armies of June, I need to let you guys know that this video and all of my videos are brought to you by the channel's Patreon. Patreon is the main source of income for the channel, and it's what allows me to continue making these Warhammer 40k videos alongside studying and playing the game. So if you enjoy the channel enough and would like to help out, then consider making a pledge on Patreon. I offer many different rewards for different pledge tiers, so you can get something back for your generosity. For example, some of the rewards include exclusive access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord server, personal coaching from myself, army list critiquing from myself and other patrons, and also custom army lists if you need help making a strong list. So if you wanted to help support my channel and get some rewards back for doing so, then come check me out on Patreon and consider making a pledge. There will be a link to the Patreon page in the description of this video. So now with that out of the way, let's get into the top 3 armies of June. Number 3, Chaos Demons. The army whose name accurately represents how I feel about one of my exes comes in this month at number 3. The Demons of Chaos had 9 top 5 placings during the month of June, so they take the 3rd spot on this month's list. For the most part, they are all Gym Vessel style lists, so not really anything we haven't seen before. Plague Bearer screens that are either -1 or -2 to hit, and with a 4+ invul because of a stratagem, and a 5+ feel no pain. They are disgustingly durable. Pink Horror Blobs because they have a ton of DACA that are amazing at clearing out chaff infantry. Bloodletters deep striking with a 3d6 charge, so pretty much guaranteed to get in from deep strike. Brimstones for cheap battalions, Nurglings for outside deployment screening or filling up a cheap battalion, and the Khorne Demon Prince with the Skull Reaver axe, which is probably one of the best weapon relics in the game in my opinion. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. That's all Chaos Demons really do. But they supplement other Chaos factions really well. For example, like Thousand Suns characters. Using Plague Bearers to screen for the Thousand Suns characters means that they can live untouched for multiple turns while casting psychic spells with immunity. And the Pink Horrors can clear some of the enemy screen, which means better smite targets for those characters. And Bloodletters coming in to target a specific unit that the smites can't get to, or just cause havoc in the enemy back lines, means your screen will live longer, which means your characters will live longer, which means more smites and psychic spells. Alongside Thousand Sons characters, some of the other Chaos units that were included were Lord Discordants or Disco Lords, who are incredibly good for their price, Blight Lord Terminators, since they are probably the best Terminators in the game with how durable they are and all of the shenanigans you can do with them, and then of course Daredeo Dreadnoughts because DACA. And speaking of DACA, number 2, Orcs. The Great Wah comes in second this month with 9 top 5 placings during the month of June, with their placings being slightly better than Demons to win the tiebreaker. Evil Sons is the most picked clan when it comes to Orcs, with Bad Moons and Death Skulls as runner-up. The core of any good Orc list seems to be 3 max units of boys with a war boss and a couple of weird boys. And then from then on, most Orc lists are like a build-your-own adventure, since they have a ton of variety with all their great units and stratagems to work with. There are some more shooting-centric lists, there are some vehicles in there, and of course there's sometimes more boys. The Ludastar also isn't quite dead yet. It's actually still really good, just not as broken as it was before the last FAQ. Now you can only do the super combo with 15 Ludas instead of 25, but it's still good nonetheless. Personally though, I think infantry spam is the way to go for Orcs, since a lot of their synergies are with infantry. Also, Fearless Hordes is an incredibly strong mechanic for board control, which is the way I like to play the game. With that said though, some brave soul actually tried out some Gorkanauts in their list and actually made it work. So kudos to that guy in thinking outside the box. I always enjoy seeing things I don't expect in top lists. It goes to show that if you're good enough and get the right matchups, you can make almost anything work in competitive 40k. Number 1, the best army of June goes to Craft Worlds. Flyer Spam makes its way into the number 1 spot this month with 12 top 5 placings during the month of June. To be fair, only 4 or 5 of these lists are actual Flyer Spam, and the rest of them are just regular looking Eldar lists. So Flyer Spam really hasn't taken over yet, but it is one of the most popular cores for Eldar armies. One of these lists actually has 9 flyers and 4 characters, but that's on the extreme end of the spectrum. The rest of these lists either use Harlequin or Jakari allies, or they have some actual Eldari ground forces in their list, like Rangers, Guardians, Wave Serpents, or Night Spinners. Night Spinners have been gaining a lot of popularity, and I can see why. They are basically the Eldari version of a Wyvern, but on steroids. With the recent change to Doom and Jinx, rest in peace, we've been seeing a lot of more pure Eldar lists as well. Sure, they still take Harlequin and Jakari allies from time to time, but for the most part, they're sticking to pure Craft Worlds to have all their units synergized with those amazing spells. I think it was implied as well, but the most popular Eldari sub-faction by far is a Laytok, for that glorious -1 to hit on their flyers, which means that their flyers are -2 to hit overall because of the hard to hit rule on top of their trait. So they make some armies like Astra Military and Tau want to cry. And against any shooting army really, they are pretty hard to kill unless you get lucky, or have stuff like Dark Reapers that ignore modifiers. Overall though, I'm glad Craft Worlds are finally where I believe they belong, which is in the top spot as the kings of competitive, instead of Inari. I still hate Inari. And that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content like this. Also, for those of you who may be new to the channel, or maybe haven't been around for all that long, I have a ton of guides and Tactica videos that I think a lot of people aren't aware of since I made them a long time ago. Click on my channel, click on playlists, and go to my guides or guides for new players. I have a ton of videos in there that can teach you a few things and possibly make you a better 40k player. Since sure, having a good list is half the battle, but learning to pilot your list well is the other half of the battle. So go check those out if you haven't already. Also, if you find yourself enjoying my content and would like to give back to the channel, then consider checking me out on Patreon like I mentioned earlier. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. So anyways, with all that said, thanks to all my current patrons. You guys are amazing and I love you all. And thanks to all of you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.